Howdy, and welcome back to the Ineligibles podcast. I am Will Stone. He is Chase Caldwell. No Hayden Garland today, but we are joined by a very special guest, Mr. Robert Behrens. Robert, how's it going?
Great, guys. We got spring football back. Happy to be back on the podcast as well.
We're glad to have you back, that's for sure.
Yes, definitely appreciate you coming on. A little bit different vibe around the program than when we last had you on before the season last year. We were all, very excited, and we don't need to get into what all went wrong last year, but we've lived that enough. So this is a very forward-thinking episode now.
Yeah, I think when I came on last year, before the season, I think my worst case scenario was us going 8-4 again, and
Yeah.
so suffice to say, things did not go as planned.
Yeah, Will and I used to do a thing where, or I say we used to, last year we did a thing where we looked back the year prior and listened to some of the predictions and things that we had, and then just kind of laughed over them. We didn't even so much as do that this year because we know
No.
that we were just dead wrong on almost everything that we thought was going to happen.
And you know what? As much as I should say we should feel bad about that as Aggies, the bottom line is that everybody was wrong about A&M. There were national guys that were in on A&M. I think it was Desmond Howard had us in the playoff. Josh Pate said that A&M had a disaster-proof roster. So this caught everybody by surprise. So as much as we all looked like idiots, I'd like to say at least we had good company in looking like idiots.
That's a good
I
point.
feel like Pate jinxed us by saying that. You can't call something disaster proof. I mean, that's just asking for it. But
Yeah.
Definitely Murphy's Law last year. But we've been doing this. This is our third off season of having this podcast, and the first two, super excited. The first year was going to be the first year in a while without Kellen Mond. We were talking quarterback, and recruiting was on the uptick, and we just won the Orange Bowl. We got gypped out of the playoff, and then last year, hey, our quarterback was hurt, and now he's healthy, and we got the number one class, best class of all time. We might make the playoff and win the whole thing this year. Look out next year when we're going to be fully loaded. But I guess what's your confidence meter right now? I think we're all kind of in wait and see mode, but as it stands today, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you at right now?
I'd say probably a waver between a 6 and a 7. Just because there are so many things that as a fan you can look at and you can find ways to convince yourself of why this team is going to be good. You can look at all those things that went bad last year, that while there's no such thing as a perfect season, you're going to have injuries, you're going to have bad luck. Just as you said, last year it was everything that could have gone wrong seemingly did. So you hope that that's an improvement. You are bringing back most production in the SEC. You're bringing in Bobby Petrino for what we hope to be a new offense. And so there's tons to talk yourself into being optimistic about. But as a fan, you have to admit that, last season happened. 5-7 happened. So until we get to 2023 season and we see tangible differences in what this team looked like last year, it's hard to get super duper confident because this team should have been really good last year. Even with all the problems, they still had a ton of talent. They were still more talented than virtually every single team they played. And you just had entire games, multi-game stretches where they just looked like a bad football team. So you can talk yourself into reasons that'll be different, but until we see it, it's hard to be overly confident.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say I would be the same. I'd be 6 to 7, somewhere in that range. Because sure, I don't know how to add more perfectly to exactly what you just said. Of as a fan, you can talk. There's so many ways that you can say, okay, look at all these guys that left the program. Well, hopefully that was the guys that was preventing us from being as good of a football team as we should have been last year. That's the fan side. Then if this was happening to any other team, we would be saying, man, look at everybody, the mass exodus that's going out of their team, and so
Yep.
it's kind of every single thing. It's like, oh man, like we're real confident now. We got Bobby Petrino coming in, and then on the other side, it's like we hired Bobby Petrino. So like the argument like goes either direction, however way you want to look at it. So it's just kind of I don't know. It's a wait and see. It's really more of I would say for me to put another name on it other than wait and see. It's more of like prove me, show me that we're going to be different. And it's just kind of like I'm going in with lowered expectations, but higher expectations. I guess I last year explained the difference between my two definitions for expectations. Like here's what I expect to happen, and here's what I expect for the team to produce. Those two different things. That's kind of where I would be, is saying I have high expectations of the team, but I'm not expecting greatness until I see it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think
that's a great way to put it, because I mean, you're exactly right that like there are the expectations we should have because of all the resources this team has, the way they've recruited, like, basically Jimbo's been given every single luxury, every single thing he's asked for to make this a great team. So we should expect results based on that. But yeah, like you said, that doesn't mean that we're expecting to go win 10 games next year right after going 5-7.
Right.
Because that seems a bit ambitious.
Yes.
Right.
And I think the biggest downside, if I'm looking for like a fatal flaw in this team of like, okay, what's going to be the thing that keeps them from really achieving what they want to, I think it's going to be that depth that you don't have because of the transfer portal and those 20 something guys that left. Because while almost none of the guys that left played a bunch last year, you're now looking at like at cornerback, at linebacker, at wide receiver. If you get like anyone injured for any length of time, you're up a creek. Yeah, and that's not to say like it's not to say there aren't guys that could maybe come in and step up, but you're suddenly relying on guys that have never played significant playing time before, right? And that's scary.
Well, and that's been the crux of our team for the past 2 seasons, is injuries. I mean, that has hurt us. It hurt us a lot last year. When you really start to look at all the injuries that we did have last year, you can point to that as a big problem for our season. But it hurt us tremendously the year before, when we lose our starting quarterback and several other players that year. It just seems like injuries. We've had the injury bug the past 2 years, and that's scary going into a year that we're saying we don't really have the depth anymore, and so but maybe the favor will be upon us.
And I think we all thought they would be a lot more active in getting guys out of the transfer portal than they were, because while you heard things about them going after guys, like ultimately we didn't bring a lot of guys in. I think we brought in 3 portal players, and one of which it sounds like is now maybe not coming after all.
Yeah. I definitely thought, after the season ended and the portal was open and, there was 100 names going in by the hour, I was like, man, we're about to go get, 10 guys out of the portal to backfill. And
I mean, there was a point that when we were sitting there and our recruiting class still only had like 13 or 14 guys, I was like, our portal class is going to outnumber our high school class.
Yeah.
Because that was the expectation, was that like we're losing all these guys that so we have to replace roster depth, and so we need to we need that portal influx right now. But I think the difficult thing is, and I didn't really think about it until we got into the process and you started seeing like guys that A&M was going after and where they ended up and things like that, was that the problem with the portal is that if you're recruiting for depth, the portal is not a very good place to go, because no one wants to transfer somewhere just to be a backup.
Yeah.
Because probably the reason they're leaving wherever they're going is because they were a backup.
Yeah.
Or because they were at like a smaller school and they're wanting to be in a bigger pond. But yeah, so if you're because A&M has a stacked roster despite all the problems. It's like pretty much every position has really talented guys at the top. And so the list of transfer portal players who are good enough to come in and actually start was very, very small.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means that you're competing with Texas and Georgia and USC and Bama, for those type of guys. And that's just, you're not going to win all those battles. A&M didn't win many of them at all.
Yeah.
But when your pool is that small, it makes it difficult.
Yeah, I think the same. I mean, that's going into signing day. I really felt like you really like to think that your team has this immaculate plan in place of how it's all going to unfold, and I feel like we've been spoiled with Jimbo to where we feel like it just happens. It's kind of like watching the 2012 team. Like, we'd be down, but we're going to win somehow. You just can't really fathom how we're going to do it, but we're going to. And that's how some of Jimbo's classes have been. And so I went into it thinking, oh, for sure, we're going to have a ton of guys from the portal. And we didn't. And so then it was kind of, I don't know. Do you think that we'll end up getting a lot, after spring ball?
I don't know, man. I mean, the way that it went back in December and January, it's kind of hard to imagine that we will. Now, you never know who's going to end up in there, and it may be that like it's guys that no one's all that excited about. Maybe it's someone from some G5 school that none of us have heard of, but ultimately, if it's at the right position, then it could still end up being a big addition.
Sure,
right. It's still a quality depth player who's not a walk-on or a freshman that's got college experience. That like I'm thinking about linebacker specifically.
Oh, for sure.
And I think when the window opens back up, you may see them get like two guys or like maybe like two or three guys on the high end, and they may get no one. But I feel like once these guys go through spring ball, there's going to be like more. There's obviously going to be more names in the portal, and it is tough. Like, this whole dynamic is tough, and I'm trying to research this, and it's tough because there's not a lot of data on it, and you have to do it very manually. But like, A&M has 75 scholarship players right now. I like, give or take a couple. I wonder if other teams are experiencing like having issues keeping 85, scholarship quality players on the roster at all times. Like, because it's hard. Like players want to play. They don't want to be depth, especially if they're not freshmen, or if they're sophomores. So I think the portal, that's we need to be strong there, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. But you still probably need to build your roster through the high school ranks, and this could be like a huge recruiting class for A&M in this next cycle, and we don't have to get into all that, but something that they definitely need to emphasize. But there's two things I want to tackle real quick, and I guess we can kind of combine them. But one is Jimbo's presser from Monday. I know you've written about it and tweeted about it, Robert. That and just the hiring of Bobby Petrino itself. Like, that's a pretty monumental shift from anything Jimbo's ever done. Like, and you had some good reasoning on why not to freak out over Jimbo's press conference on Monday.
Yeah, I mean, to me, and let's be clear, like, that answer was not encouraging. It's not what anyone wanted to hear. Like,
sure.
Because that was a softball question where it's pretty much the answer is Jimbo's calling plays or Bobby's calling plays. And he gave anything but that. He gave, a very wishy-washy, like, you can kind of interpret it however you want to answer. So he didn't do himself any favors. But to me, like, it's abundantly clear based on that entire press conference that Jimbo just does not give a blank about like appeasing the press or scoring PR points. Because I mean, he on pretty much every single question in that press conference, didn't really give a solid answer. He kind of beat around the bush, or he'd, halfway address it, but then he kind of meanders off somewhere. And part of that's just Jimbo, but it seemed like even more so than usual, he was very, like, just very cagey and, didn't really want to be there.
Yeah.
So it's not what you want to see,
Right.
from him, because like you want to see him there like excited and
Yeah.
presenting the positive picture. But
Like
that's not what
I
he does. And like ultimately, as long as he's doing the right things behind the scenes, I
yeah,
kind of don't
absolutely.
care.
Yeah. Like they showed practice clips and like you could see Jimbo being hands off and like Bobby's the one coaching the quarterbacks, tweaking things, giving orders, like he's the one coaching. And you hear it in some of the stacked interviews too. And the interview that Anais did, he's like Jimbo gets to be, hands off and be the CEO and walk around and check on other positions. I'm not sure if y'all have made like in August they've had that open practice the past 2 years. I've been able to go both times, and Jimbo's really just with the offense the entire time, and really just with the quarterbacks and maybe the tight ends. But I think it's going to be a big positive to be more of a CEO, kind of oversee the whole team and let Bobby do his thing. Like we know that Petrino has produced great offenses before, and he's never had this level of talent on a roster. So it's a very exciting deal for sure.
Yeah, and I would add like just so if you were someone that you were convinced that Jimbo is not going to give up play calling, that he just brought in Bobby Petrino as a puppet, whatever. I mean, basically, what the argument you're making is that the A&M administration was on board with firing Daryl Dickey, going through a coaching search, hiring a guy who costs you probably at least like $500,000 more to hire, who's still not going to call plays, is only there for the optics of it. And the hire you made for optics was Bobby Petrino.
Right.
Like
that's an excellent point.
Like
no, that's a wonderful point, actually.
yeah. I was like, because I mean that was a firestorm when we brought him in. Like the only reason you take that PR hit is if you say this is worth it because we need the help on offense.
Yeah.
Right.
And so if you're not handing him the reins, he is not the guy that you hire.
Yeah. And if you're not handing him the reins, he's gone by like game 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I made that point too, is, people talk about, well, it's like maybe, Jimbo's telling him now that he's going to call the shots, but then, yeah, like halfway through the Alabama game, Jimbo takes back over and, it's his offense again. And it's like, yeah, but I mean, Bobby Petrino has shown before, like he is happy to walk away from a team mid-season. Like, especially if he's the coordinator and all of a sudden like play calling gets taken away. I have no doubt that he would just say bye.
Yeah.
And so like that's, to me, that's part of the appeal of having him versus someone who's maybe more of like an up and coming guy, because up and coming guys still care about their reputation. They care about, it's like getting their next job.
Right.
And so they probably wouldn't do something that drastic, but Bobby doesn't care. Bobby, I don't think he's going to have any issue standing up to Jimbo when he needs to.
Yeah.
And that's probably something that's a good thing.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on that one. That was my one like good thing about hiring Bobby Petrino, was that he's not going to care. He doesn't care about optics at this point. Why even worry about it? So I think that's the key point, to the main benefit to Bobby Petrino. But he also has a good history and can be a really good coach and can do some good things for our offense. I think I took Jimbo's take on it not necessarily as I don't know what the word is, but I didn't take it as a bad thing. I didn't necessarily take it as coach speak like most everybody else did. I took it more as like there are two opposing views, and they've got completely different styles, and they're probably going to have to kind of mesh that. And it's probably going to be in flux throughout the year as they're trying to learn how to kind of switch between each other's styles. And I'd like to see it to where I'd like to see us come about where we're, we attack, we go up quickly, and then we just run Jimbo's offense the rest of the game, and we just bore them to death until we win the game. That's what I would love to see, because really, I mean, under Jimbo, actually, I'm going to say this. This has no data behind it, so I might be dead wrong. So sorry if I am, but I can't think of times like it seems like whenever we play from ahead, that's when we generally win. That when we're playing from behind is when it's just constantly like it's miserable feeling. When we're playing from ahead, it's like, oh yeah, we got this in the bag the whole game. And like I said, I might be dead wrong on that, but that's just me, kind of my memory, if it serves me correctly.
There's something to that, because I mean, if you get down 2 scores, like I'm not sure if Jimbo's offense, especially the way it was run last year, is capable of mounting a comeback, like a furious comeback, and taking the lead and winning the game. But as far as
I think the only time that only happened once last year to my memory, and that was Arkansas. And of course, that took a miracle like goal line fumble return for and a doink off the upright for it to happen.
Because it was in an NFL stadium that has taller goalposts than college ones. But as far as the press conference goes, like when I first listened to it, I'm like, man, like I hated that. And then as time went on, I was like, okay, like yeah, he probably is pissed. Like he's upset about last year, and like that made him look horrible, and like he's probably been busting his tail trying to make it right, and he probably is excited for this, spring practice and for the season. But he was not happy about any kind of questions about scheme or about Petrino and anything like that. So,
and one thing I hadn't fully thought about till really just now is that, while obviously Jimbo may not be thrilled about giving up play calling, whatever, but the bottom line is that, like, I mean, he's still going to be involved in the offense. He's still going to be game planning. He's still going to be like, helping him with scheme. And I'm sure there's going to be times where it's like, it's going to be a critical situation, and he's going to say, like, you need to run here, or like, I want to do this. And so part of his reaction and his bristling that we kind of saw, it could also just be that because he knows that, like, he still is going to have his fingerprints on this offense, that he doesn't want the Bobby Petrino to just get like 100% of the credit for if you have to see this like huge offensive turnaround, and everyone's just going to say, look, Bobby solved the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure Jimbo's going to be
the problem that Jimbo created.
It's like I helped solve this problem too.
Yeah.
Now it's like, I don't think people are going to give him that credit, but I'm sure from his perspective, like, he's still the head coach. He's not wanting to just like heap praise on this guy coming in that he probably does feel like took away part of his job.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But in terms of the hire itself, like it's something I'm pretty excited about. Maybe like, and we'll talk about a few things, about that we're excited about this spring. But I'm excited for the spring game just to see what offense are we going to run, like what plays are we running, like what formations are we doing, like and we're not going to empty the playbook out or anything, but like just to get a feel for it, like Bobby, in interviews, and you can tell when he's been different places, like he likes to coach to his players' strengths and not fit, a square peg into a round hole. Like his offense with Lamar was different than his offense with Jeff Brom. Like, it's two very different styles, and he has success with both. So it's very encouraging, and I mean, he's got the talent to do it. If like, I don't know, I'm excited about the proposition, and I can't wait to see what the offense looks like as we go through spring.
And I'll be honest, like when we first announced the hire, I didn't love it just because, I mean, you get so much baggage with Bobby Petrino, and and there's been so many places where he's been that it's ended badly, not necessarily even on the field, but just it seems like he just leaves like a wake of destruction wherever he goes. But one of the things that's kind of turned me around on it was, if you listen to Arkansas fans talk about A&M hiring Bobby Petrino, they are all like some combination of pissed / terrified.
Yeah.
And I feel like usually in college football, like when you hire somebody, the fans of like whatever previous school they're at will normally be like, oh, good luck with that one. Like
Yeah.
they'll remember all the bad stuff. But Arkansas fans are like, they hate that A&M's going to have Bobby Petrino running their offense.
Yeah.
So that like gives me a glimmer of hope. And granted, I know he was there like a decade plus ago. But it gives you the glimmer of hope that like, well, hey, like, like if they're this worried about it, maybe there is something to it. And then there's also just the fact that, assuming that we're running his offense, and he's the one in control, like how could it not be better than what we saw last year?
Right.
Because even if this offense just from bad to average, like this team gets way, way better real fast.
Yeah. Well, and that's both of the points that both of y'all made there are the two like indicators that make me excited about Petrino, because Jimbo has always tried to fit a square peg into a round hole as long as he's been here. I mean, it's just constant. I mean, he's hard-headed at it. I mean, it's like we're just going to keep doing it until it works, and y'all just have to figure it out. And he doesn't seem to make any adjustments comparatively to the players that he's got. Where Petrino, like if that's one of his strengths, well, that's good. Maybe it's really just to say, hey, Jimbo, here's how you need to change up your offense given the players that you have. Let's talk about like this is a good idea what you have here, but we don't have the strengths in this category or that category, so maybe we need to shift a couple things around here. And so maybe it's not that he's taking on full play calling, but it's more of play scheming and saying, okay, hey, in this scenario, when we play this team, let me run with it because we need to do it in a different way than what you're doing. Because there are teams that we have played that Jimbo's style of football works perfectly fine, and there's other teams that it's just not. And that's where it's always just been very evident to me when we go out and we just get beat by a team that's like they had our number. They knew exactly what we were going to do. I knew what we were going to do. Everybody knew what we were going to do. There was no shifting around of the game plan. And some of these better teams, you're going to have to shift some of that around. But for the Arkansas fans to be so freaked out about it, that has me excited as well.
They're scared to death.
I just can't think of it like another team. To your point, Robert, like I can't think of another coach that's been like that. That this other team that they're leaving is just freaked out. Like, I mean, even when Sumlin left, everywhere he went, it's like, oh, y'all got Sumlin. Sumlin was a great coach for us. He did a lot of good things for us. But
even whenever like back when we stole Chavis from LSU, that they were like, oh, thank God he's gone.
Yeah. And we were lording him around like he was the best hire ever.
Yeah. Because I remember, heard so many LSU fans, talking about third and Chavis, and I was like, oh, whatever. Like that's not a thing.
Yeah.
And then like a year or two in, you're like, okay, it's kind of a thing.
And with Petrino, it could just be because I feel like part of Jimbo's offense, I feel like it's not like just like it's not rocket science, but I think there's just so much volume, and it's like he's trying to do it's like the Cheesecake Factory. Like the playbook's too big, the menu's too big. Like here, pick your best things and do those really, really well. And maybe I feel like that's probably the style that Petrino has. Like, hey, like this roster we have is built for X, Y, and Z. We're gonna rep the hell out of that in practice. That's what we're gonna run. Like, forget all the other stuff. Like, let's not even bother trying to teach it and install it because we're not gonna run it. But
I mean, I feel like so much of last year, because Jimbo talked so much about the execution of like that was the problem. But at some point, it's like if on every play, you always have like a guy like missing a blocking assignment or a receiver where he's not supposed to be, or the QB doesn't make the right read. It's like if that's happening like chronically, like that's a coaching problem.
Right.
That's it's like something's wrong with your offense or something's wrong with the way you're teaching it, because that shouldn't be happening like seemingly every single play.
Yeah.
And I forget who brought this up, but I heard someone talk about, they're like, look, it's like, bottom line is that, like, in college football, players make mistakes because that's just the nature of the game. They said if you have an offense that requires all 11 guys to perform their job perfectly for the play to work, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you have to have, like, where, you get the ball out quickly, you have quick reads, you get guys in space. Like, you have to have plays that get you easy yards, because you're going to have times where it's like guys miss blocks or guys don't run the right route, and that can't just like completely blow up, your chances of success.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point there, I dogged on Tom Herman for that same thing at like the very first year of the podcast, because he was constantly saying like, yeah, they just got to execute. I mean, we had a great game plan going into it, and I'm like, man, what kind of coach like goes out there and is like, yeah, we did good coaching, but our players did terrible. I really dogged on that. But Jimbo, towards the end of the season, I really kind of felt the same way towards him, where I'm like, take ownership of it, Jimbo. Like, this is your offense. There's a reason why this execution problem is happening, and it's probably because it's too complicated. You need to simplify something. I don't know what the correct result is, but take ownership of it, realize that it's your fault, and go ahead and figure that out.
Yeah.
And I think I like to think that maybe he has. Maybe that's why. I mean, if you read any self-help book, it's going to tell you, like, go off on a ledge, jump off the ledge and do something extremely different. If something freaks you out, that's what you need to be doing, because that's what's going to make you a better person and all that. So sure, hopefully that's what Jimbo's doing here with the hire of Petrino, and just hiring somebody completely different, because obviously he had hired somebody that saw things a lot like he did in Dickey, and that wasn't working. So get somebody completely different and see if it works.
Yeah, it's just incredible because during the football season last year, when all of us, like, it was obvious that we needed to make a change on the offense. From rival fans, you heard a lot of people talk about, they're like, oh well, because A&M has that huge buyout, A&M doesn't have any leverage to make him make a change, and Jimbo's stubborn, so he's not going to do it. And then, of course, we fire Daryl Dickey, we hire Bobby Petrino, and then all of a sudden the narrative is, well, Jimbo only did it because, the athletic department made him do it.
Yeah.
And these are the same people who just said 4 months ago that the athletic department had no leverage to make Jimbo do anything. And so, you're in a no situation, no win situation with those folks, obviously. But
it's not a great time to be arguing on Twitter if you're an A&M fan. you don't have a lot of ground to stand on right now, so I'm really excited for the season to get here and get 5-7 off of our back. Like,
yeah, let's just go beat all of our G5 teams, and that'll be a nice start.
Let's start there. Hey, I do know our first game is New Mexico, and they were like unequivocally the worst team in the country last year in FBS. So we got that going for us.
Yeah, because we played them in, I guess, 2021, and that was with Zach Calzada, and I think that was one of the few games that season where we just like obliterated someone.
Yeah. All right. Well,
so that means that we're gonna go out game one, and then we're gonna win the championship.
Oh, like, for sure. As much as I'm sitting here talking about like wait and see, cautious optimism, it's like as soon as we have like the first touchdown drive of the season, we're all just gonna be like, that was amazing. The offense is fixed. 10-2.
No, like I'm gonna go to that open practice in August and be like, I'm gonna come back here after I go and be like, Connor Wigman is going to win the Heisman. Like, y'all should have seen him out there. He just dropping dimes. But let's talk about this roster a little bit, and then we'll start on offense. But it's as bad as last year was. I mean, like we've said, the talent is definitely there, and like it's hard to not love some of what's on this roster already. But like I guess, like, what are some position groups that you guys are really excited about on offense?
I mean, the biggest one I'm going to talk about is offensive line, because how can you not? As much as that was a weakness last year, part of that was injury. You were without Bryce Foster for most of the year. You lost Jordan Moko. You had, I think, Trey Zune played through a lot of injuries. It sounds like he had surgery at the end of the year. But this is the first time since 2020 that we bring back all 5 starting offensive linemen. And plus, you've got like 3 other guys behind them who still played, significant snaps last year. And the thing I keep going back to is if you look at 2019, that team, that was a team, they went 7-5, but all 5 losses were to top 10 teams. But the weakness of that team was offensive line. And, like Kellen Mond couldn't do anything because he was running for his life every single play, it seemed like. And then in 2020, they brought back that exact same offensive line, same 5 guys. And suddenly it was like maybe A&M's best offensive line of the past decade, save for 2012.
Right.
And so it goes to show you that especially at the college level, just having that continuity of like all those guys being together and all those guys having another year in the system in strength and conditioning and all that, like can take a not very good offensive line and turn it into a really, really good one. So for me, I think that's like, and if you have a good offensive line, like everything else is gravy. Like, moving the ball is easy if you have a good offensive line.
Well, and to add on to that example, 2019 was the first year of Josh Henson, and 2020, second year of Josh Henson. You bring back all 5 guys, big step forward. Adazio has caught a lot of hate, and maybe rightfully so, but he is still our O-line coach. This is his second year with the same group of guys. So that could be a similar outcome. And I put this on Twitter maybe 2 weeks ago, where I'm trying to get into more like advanced stats, and this isn't super advanced, but I looked at pressure rates, because like pressure rates allowed by your O-line, because in 2021 we weren't great, like bottom like 15 or 20. I was like, okay, if we can fix this and allow a little bit less pressure rate in 2022, we can be really good. Well, we regressed even more, and we were like, if you remove the service academies, we were like the 4th worst team in the country. And you look at the teams in the playoff, like Georgia, Ohio State, theirs were like 18% and like 21%, and ours was like 41%. So you can't do anything. Like, is we can talk about how bad Jimbo's scheme or play calling was, but if you can't block anybody, it doesn't matter if you're running the Chiefs offense. Like, you're not going to have a good time. So I'm glad you're excited about the O-line, because I'm a little gun shy because I've gone on here the past 2 offseasons and been like, hey, O-line's fine, they're going to be great. And it has not worked out. So I'll let you praise them, and I'll just shut up. Maybe they'll be better.
And I'll admit, like, I mean, this optimism it's fully based on, like you said, like that 2019, 2020 jump. And I realized like that's not universal. That doesn't happen every time.
Right.
But it's just the fact that like I've seen it happen before under Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M. So it's, you can talk yourself into that happening. Now the fact that like half those guys aren't playing in the spring is not encouraging. But I mean, ultimately, when was the last time you really like saw something during the season and you thought, oh, like I'm glad that guy played spring ball? You know, we all make a big deal about it now, but ultimately, like there's going to be guys in this spring that are going to be, starting in the fall. There's going to be freshmen who aren't even on campus yet, or like getting ready for senior prom, who are making an impact this fall. So spring practice matters, but it's not the end all be all.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
I feel like Trey Zune took a lot of heat last year. And I think he had like a issue with his kneecap or something, like the week before the season
I don't remember
started.
exactly what it was either.
But you could tell he looked very uncomfortable, like just moving around, and like he still, toughed it out and played through it. He's not available in the spring, but guys like that, like just get healthy, for the fall. Like, the reps are important and things like that, and then the guys that are healthy this spring, it's good they're getting the reps. But if you're beat up from last season, like it's okay to take a break and really focus on that rehab and get healthy for the fall. So, and even Jimbo said he's like these guys won't be available, but they're probably going to be back in May. So they're not going to miss the whole summer lifting program with injuries. At least most of those guys. So
Just
that's
don't let
encouraging.
don't let Bryce Foster kiss anybody for the next 6
Yeah,
months.
no kidding. It's comical. At this point, it's comical what all went wrong last year. I know we've already discussed it, but like just things like that, like, oh yeah, our starting center got mono right before the season started.
And then we had a flu epidemic. Like that hadn't
Yeah.
happened since 1919.
We had like
Yeah.
40 players against Florida that suited up.
Yeah, and I tell you, like that reminds me. That's one thing that and I pointed this out, and I have no idea like how true this was, but if you look at Wegman's stats, like from the games he played, like he looked like he played pretty well in pretty much every game except Auburn, and that Auburn game was just miserable.
Yeah.
But I was like, it's like that was a week after the Florida game in which he was out with the flu. So I wonder how much of it played into the fact of like he was like available, but like it was in no way 100%.
That's a
For
good
that
point.
Auburn game.
Yeah. And also no A-Chain in that game,
Yeah,
which
Yeah.
doesn't help to not have your
No.
best player.
but like I said, it's like this is like yes, like this the mind of like the optimistic fan of like you're tracking yourself into like, oh, he didn't play well because he was a week removed from the flu. That's
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't just that our offense was terrible the entire year.
Yeah. And like a few of us were at that game, and it was miserably cold and windy. And like, call me 2% or whatever we left at halftime. I was like, that's the ugliest half of football I've watched in my entire life. Like Auburn too. Like they weren't doing anything great either. It was just, it was not pretty to watch. And
that was, I think Auburn against South Carolina too. Those I think those might have been the two games that pissed me off the most last year, just because you watch those and you were like, those were like bad football teams.
yeah,
Like South Carolina, we gave them 17 points to start off the game, and then we outplayed them the rest of the way, and just just didn't quite do enough to catch up. And then Auburn, you just watched like both teams fiddle around for 3 quarters,
yeah,
and you just had to, you're like, this isn't a good football team. Like this is, I'm the king of like us losing a game and talking about stuff and just like, oh, that's a pretty good team, but yeah, you're right. You just lost to bad teams.
Yeah.
I challenge anyone to show me a worse start to a game than us against South Carolina. Like they run back the opening kick, then we throw a big six, and then we fumble that they return to like the 3-yard line, and somehow we only allow a field goal on that one. But,
and of course, and that was just 2 weeks after like we had like the game against Bama where obviously it's backup quarterback, they turn over the ball over 4 times, but still like we showed signs of life that like we almost won that game. We probably should have won that game. Then you have the bye, and then you're going into South Carolina. Like I think every A&M fan was like, okay, like this is like the reset. Like we're gonna like win a couple games in a row. We're gonna get on a winning streak. We're gonna salvage the season. And yeah, to start it off, like the first 5 minutes of that game just catastrophically was such a gut punch.
Yeah, absolutely. I think position group I'm excited to watch on the offense is going to be the receivers. I'm optimistic with the names that we have returning. Like just the thought of Anais, Moose, Evan Stewart, like, and even Noah Thomas, like to have all of those guys at once, hopefully, assuming that we don't have any injuries that plague us. That the prospect of that is exciting to me. And whenever I pair that with Wigman and Bobby Petrino's offense, that seems like we're going to see a lot more excitement this year. Assuming everything else falls into place, because I'm with you guys on the offensive line. That's where I would say I'm most optimistic for that and quarterback, of course, but of course mainly worried about running back. But I don't know. I'm most excited to see the receivers, because I think we just all as A&M fans are just desperate to see good receiver play. and exciting downfield passes, and just we're just
explosive plays.
Yeah, there's just a void that needs to be filled there for us. And I just feel like over the last 2 seasons, like we haven't had all of our playmakers at the top of their game at the same time. And all of these guys returning. I think Anais and of course I'll mention this later too, but Anais and Damani returning, I think, is the biggest key to the off season. And moreover, like, I think that was a bigger win than anybody that we might have gotten in the transfer portal.
Absolutely. Yeah. And those are two guys, like, I mean, Anais, I kind of get it, because I think with the injury, he wasn't going to be able to do the combine or pro day. And so, like, just it made sense probably financially for him to try to come back and reestablish his value.
Sure.
But even so, like, I mean, I would have been I would not have been surprised if he had went ahead and left and just tried to get a free agent deal and gotten on somewhere.
Sure.
And Damani too, just because there is a part of me that's like, those guys have so much tape that it's like, coming back another year, they're not gonna just skyrocket their value, because guys have seen them on that field for 3-4 years. But man, yeah, like, what a value add that is, not only just on the field, because Anais at a position we're very, very thin at is huge. I think A&M would have been okay at safety if Damani wasn't here, because we've got so many other good guys coming in. But just having, I think, that presence in the locker room, because that was something A&M I feel like they missed last year, was like, because we had hardly any like seniors to begin with.
Right.
And it definitely seemed like we had some leadership issues in that locker room, so maybe they can be the guys, along with others, that step up and kind of take that role on.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly on that.
Yeah. And I've said on here before, like, Anais is my favorite Aggie player of like the last, like, since Johnny and Mike. Like, he's such a baller. He you can watch him play and tell, like, he loves playing football. Like, it doesn't matter where he plays. Like, I remember watching him pass protect playing running back against Oklahoma State. He's just like knocking guys back. I'm like, dude, like, this is a ball player right here, and he loves A&M and he reps A&M, and I'm super pumped to have him back. That's
and I know, like,
win.
and this doesn't always translate. You can't always read body language and everything, but certainly, like, when Anais plays, it looks like he is trying as hard as he possibly can every time he has the ball. There's and that's not always a good indicator, because Kellen Mond was, fans ragged on him notoriously because he just always looked like stone-faced, and like people accused him of like not getting fired up or not caring. I think that's just his demeanor, and he was just very cool under pressure. But yeah, Anais, like, every time he has the ball, like, it looks like he's just wanting to just like run through the entire defense.
Yeah,
no doubt about it. And what I will never forget, because I think about it every time that I think about Anais, especially to this point, all that he's done for A&M and all that he's done for himself as a player, and just how good of a player he is overall. I'll never forget his commitment day, and just the amount of chaos that happened across message boards of like, do we know who this guy is? Like, are we accepting it? Does he have a committable, offer? And there was this whole question mark about, did some random guy just commit to us that we're not going to honor scholarship? I mean, there was this whole question, and then it was finally put to Jimbo, and Jimbo's like, no, this is a guy that I wanted, and he is a game changer. He is a baller and balls out, and he is. I mean, he's proven that. So I think anybody that probably said that back in the day is probably looking back thinking like, man, I'm sure glad I was wrong.
Yeah, no kidding.
And that's, as much as like, I mean, I like follow recruiting really closely, and like, and I will tout like the importance of recruiting, but yeah, it's like, that's like the anecdote that kind of proves all that otherwise. Because like you said, it's like the rumor was when he committed, they're like, oh, like that means that A&M missed out on someone else.
Yeah.
is like the only reason that he was a take was because we missed out on other guys. And it wasn't like he like slowly developed into a usable player. Like as like his freshman year, like as soon as he got on the field, you're like, oh, this guy can play.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think he was the first one of his class to get on the field like that.
He was, yeah.
I mean, he was out there instantly, and that's the thing. Him and Damani both were. Damani started day one, and so that's, to me, going back to what you said about the senior leadership. Like, those guys helped pave the way of Jimbo's time at Texas A&M, and so those are the leaders that you would want as seniors, on both sides of the ball. They're the guys that started day one, and I think he was maybe game three, but here they are, coming back, and I think the only if A-Chain would have come back in addition to both of them, this would be a whole different conversation. I wouldn't be saying like I'm a wait and see. I'm like, we're running through everybody. Like I would be so confident because my three favorite players are back, and I'm excited that we got both of them. And I think that senior leadership will be hugely influential. It has to be. And if it's not, then it's just going to be like last year.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The positive thing I'd say about running back is while, none of these guys are Devon A-Chain, because he is he's going to be a legit NFL player. But I think we've got three guys who are legit SEC starters.
Yeah.
So it's, and we've got a bunch of other positions where that's where, if the first two guys get injured, you're that third guy. It's like, you're a lot more worried than you would be at running back.
Sure.
So we may not have like the high end potential of this guy's going to be a star, but I think we're going to get good production out of that position no matter what.
I agree.
Yeah, that's actually like the position I was going to pick for mine. I like the potential of every position. Like, I love Connor Wigman in year two, under Petrino with the better O-line, and the weapons at receiver. I think Donovan Green looks fantastic. I'm excited to see what they can do with maybe two tight end sets if Theodore or if Jake Johnson can get on the field. I think that could present some good matchups. But these running backs, man, like Petrino likes to run the football, and I think all three of the guys are home run hitters. Like, I don't know if people realize the speed that Le'Veon Moss has. Like, he ran like a 10-4 100 meter in high school. Like, the dude can hit a home run. Like, he can take it 80 yards in an instant. Reuben Owens, same thing. Like, he was a track star. You watch his film; it's just long runs, and he's to me, Reuben is like the perfect modern offensive running back. And then you got Amari Daniels, who is always when he gets in the game, he's flashing. Like, that's a good football player with good explosive ability and runs hard. So there may not be one that makes all SEC, but there's some really good backs in that group.
Yeah, because Amari especially, I feel like every time he was on the field, he'd get the ball and you'd kind of sit there and you'd be like, "Who was that?" And you're like, "Oh, that's Amari Daniels."
Right.
Because every time he got on there, he made good plays.
Yeah.
So, and I know I tried to say well, maybe none of them are going to be a star, but maybe that's not fair because Le'Veon Moss, I think, was a top 100 national player. Reuben Owens, obviously 5-star, I think number 2 running back in the country in his class. So, that's not to say that one of these guys couldn't, become, the bell cow either.
Yeah. Chase and I are in a college fantasy dynasty league, and I think I had Moss last year, and I think I dropped him. So the starting running back at A&M is a coveted position as long as Jimbo Fisher's here. You're going to get carries.
Although we'll see what the rotation is, though, because obviously we have a new running back coach, and a lot of times that position coach is the one that's actually putting them in and out. So I'll be interested to see between having a new running back coach and also with Petrino if they do try to do more of a committee approach.
I mean, he did a great job last year with Zach Evans and Quinshon Judkins both. I think Judkins had 1,300 yards, and Zach Evans still had a great year. So, yeah, I think that's a good get at running back coach. Defensive positions. I feel like oddly with Jimbo as head coach, defense has kind of been the calling card. Kept us afloat in 2021 with the struggles on offense. Took a little bit of a step back, but you look at it and it's the same story. Like there was just a rash of injuries and youth, and but I think second year for most of these guys. It's pretty exciting to see what they're going to be able to do, especially like they played so much last year, and now like they've got all that. They've got the offseason in the weight room. Is there a group that you guys look at? You're like, man, I can't wait to see this group. There's one obvious one, but I'll let you guys take it.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and take the obvious one, and that's defensive line should just be like absurd,
Right?
Because A&M lost like multiple like really high 4-star players off the defensive line to the portal, and and people try to talk about it's like look at they lost all their defensive line, and it's like no, we didn't.
Yeah,
we didn't even lose anyone who was in like the top 8.
Yeah, we had like 3 teams worth of defensive linemen.
So yeah, I'm not even going to rattle through all the names because I think just the other day I was trying to like go through like a depth chart on Twitter of like I was like, okay, here's probably what like the rotation will be, and then I left off Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy, who's like could be like one of our best players. I mean, that's just how like stacked A&M is at that position, and that's just because they've recruited that position better than anyone in the country for like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And the fact that you got McKinley Jackson back for his senior year as well, that was huge.
He had an awesome year.
That's the one position that like I'm gonna Josh Pate it up and say that unit is disaster proof.
Yeah,
because you could lose like your starting 4 and still have like a top 3 defensive line in the SEC.
Yeah,
sure.
I thought so. Like so with McKinley, like he was super highly rated, was pretty good his freshman year, and then like missed a lot his sophomore year. When he came back against Bama, that dude was a wrecking ball. Like that is a true like all SEC caliber D tackle, and I'm thrilled he's back. Like he's going to be like the cornerstone of that D line. But I've got a funny anecdote about what you were saying about the roster. Someone had posted on one of the message boards like there's so many guys that are single digit numbers. It's like 3, 4, 5, 6. Like they're all these D linemen. And I was watching some of the practice clips. I was like, man, who is number 2? That guy, that guy's huge. And is that one of our ends? it was Jacoby Matthews at safety. I was like, man, he looks incredible. that's a gigantic safety.
That was the other unit I was going to pick if I didn't go D line too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like it's good to see Bobby Taylor on the field and going through drills. To have such a Pied Piper role in that historic class. Missed a lot last year with injury. Like I'm horrible at scouting corners, like because most of like if nothing happens, that means you did a good job. So like it's hard to really to analyze that, but like that he's a pretty big corner, like big athletic looking dude. I saw he got like a one-handed catch in one of the clips yesterday, but Bryce Anderson, I'm a huge fan of his. Put him anywhere on the field, he's going to make plays. I think safety and your starting corners are pretty salty as well. The few transfers we did take were at defensive back, and finally getting Tony Grimes to College Station after missing out, like that was huge. That was huge.
And that's one like that did not get as much national play as I thought it would.
Right.
And I know like he's maybe slightly underachieved at North Carolina, but like it seems like everyone at North Carolina has underachieved. And so I still think that's something where he could come in, especially he's coming into like what was the number 1 pass defense in the country last year. I know there are reasons you could say that teams why pass the ball when you could just run the ball against that defense last year. But I mean, it was a great secondary last year, and like there's no reason he can't come in, especially opposite Tyreek Chappelle, who I think is going to have a monster year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that. I don't care whether Tony underperformed or not. If that's what somebody's going to say, because I'll never forget just watching him in his freshman year, and the whole key to everything the whole time was that he was 17 years old out there playing, and that he was supposed to be a senior and all that kind of stuff, and he was by far and away the best player on the field. Like, you could just watch their games and you're like, that who's that guy? And it was a high school senior out there playing with college kids, and so like he I have a lot of faith that he's going to come in and be a monster for us.
Yeah, I mean, he played against us in the Orange Bowl, and I remember being like, "Damn, like we just missed out on that guy. Like that's a good football player."
I had
over
the
there.
exact same thought. Like, he made like several plays in the Orange Bowl, and you just sat there and you're like, dang it. It's like, there's nothing worse than like missing out on a recruit and then like seeing him make plays against your team
Yeah,
the next
No
year.
doubt.
Are y'all just a little bit salty that in our historic recruiting class, best class ever, that there were 2 Texans we missed on, and they're both probably gonna be first round picks in Harold Perkins and Kelvin Banks. like I know the guys we got are awesome. Like I love Evan Stewart, Bryce Anderson, the whole bunch. But like, man, Harold Perkins had a monster year last year.
Man, I think that's going to haunt us for years, that like in back-to-back classes, you had the number 1 linebacker in the country in Texas. Both of them committed to A&M at some point, and then somehow you ended up with neither, and they ended up at LSU in Texas.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a thorn in our side for at least a couple more years.
Yeah.
And I mean, especially just because the fact that it's not just that you didn't get those guys, but when you missed on those guys, both times it was somewhat late in the process, and then you kind of were left holding the bag, not having, any like great backup plan for your linebackers in those classes. And I think we're
Exactly.
feeling the effects of that now.
Yeah, I agree.
I guess on that,
but at the same time, like I'm sitting there watching like practice footage the past couple of days, seeing like Marshall Harris and Damian Sanford, and I'm like, oh no, we'll be fine. We'll be fine.
Yeah. Are there any freshmen? Because like obviously last year we did like almost 2 hours on the signing class. We barely touched it this year, but are there any young guys that you're excited about? It wasn't as great of a class, but there's probably 10 or 12 guys that I'm like, man, like that's a good player right there, like a high end player.
Yeah. I mean, we already talked about Ruben Owens. I think he's the most obvious one, just because one of the highest rated players in the class at a position where there's always somewhat of a path to getting on the field. I'm trying to think who else, because you have David Hicks, but defensive line, that's a hard nut to crack for most freshmen.
Sure.
And then given the fact of like what A&M already has, I could see a situation where he really barely plays this year, as good as he is. I'm kind of blanking on. I need to go back and look at our class.
I'll tell you one of my guys. If Chase Basantis is not an NFL lineman, I'll be shocked. Like that. That's what an NFL lineman looks and plays like. If you watch that guy's tape, like he's already very physically developed, but like he's so physical. His technique is outstanding. He gets low and just drives people into the ground. And people were like, maybe he's a guard. We're not sure if he's a tackle, but I think he's taking reps at right tackle right now, which I'm very happy, because you likely lose Ruben after this year. But that's a guy I'm very pumped about. I think he was a top 100 guy too. So you need to be strong on the O-line. That guy is a brick house, and if he's not an NFL draft pick, I'll be very shocked.
Yeah, and I'd be thrilled if he ends up being a tackle, just because the past few years it seems like we've recruited well on the line, but we've gotten a lot of guards.
Yeah.
So like we need depth at tackle for sure.
For sure.
Yeah, I'd say Micah Teese is probably mine that y'all hadn't mentioned. He's a good athlete, and I think I'm very hopeful that he's going to come in and do well for us. I don't know how else to say that.
Yeah, no,
I would
I had
say
him.
one that like I'm not like predicting that he's going to break out immediately, but one that I think most interested just to see how things play out is Torian York, because
Yeah,
that was like a really late addition to the class. He kind of, I feel like in a lot of ways was the almost the quote unquote consolation prize to not getting Anthony Hill.
right.
Um, but like you look at his high school tape and like I mean the guy would just like all he does is make tackles. And it's
Yeah,
one that he doesn't blow you out of the water with athleticism. Like he doesn't have the measurables, but it just seems like on every play that you see, like he's in the right place.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said for, especially at linebacker. Like if you can read what the offense is doing and get yourself in the right spot, like that's 80% of it.
yeah. Is he kind of like Buddy Johnson to you a little bit?
I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, because Buddy was never going to be the tallest guy or biggest guy, but that was a guy that knew his assignment, could diagnose plays, and make tackles. So that's what we're really lacking is those kinds of backers. And
Mhm.
maybe York was like they probably don't offer him if they get Anthony Hill, but I think he's a pretty good ball player. I had Micah Teese on my short list too. I remember watching his tape. I'm like, man, this kid's got some speed, and when it comes to receiver in the college game, like just give me all the fast guys. like,
Yeah, for sure.
our guys will teach you how to run routes and catch, but like you bring us the speed that that you can't coach, and I'll take that. Which he can run routes and catch just fine as well. So
Yeah.
he may be an early impact guy.
Yeah. What was there was a corner that we took to what's his name from
Is
Oak
it,
Cliff, Javon
uh,
Thomas.
Oh, yeah. There's Javon Thomas, also Gravion Rogers.
Yeah, Rogers also very fast.
Yeah.
He did everything for Lagrange, and I think they were like, yeah, he runs like a 4.3. So you'll take that at corner all day, every day.
I just thought of, and this is mine, Dalton Brooks.
Oh man, I love
That
Dalton Brooks.
dude, like once again, I know he played at Shiner, so it was like small school, but man, like every single highlight you saw, you're like, he is the best player on the field.
Yeah,
Um,
I was kind of worried because like he was a star running back at Shiner, and we offered him for safety, but you watch his tape, like he's hitting people, like he's hitting people, he's making plays on the ball. He's gonna be just fine at safety, I think. He's a great player.
and also like honestly, if we either have like just a ton of injuries at running back or just some of those guys don't pan out, I wouldn't be shocked to see him get a look over there either.
That's true.
I'm not basing that on any like information. I haven't heard anything like that, but I mean, but like you said, just you see how productive he was. Is like, if you get in a bad spot, like that's a great insurance policy to have.
Yeah. Yeah, I like Javon Thomas too. That Oak Cliff secondary had like 3 or 4 D1 guys in it. I know they had Malik Muhammad that went to Texas in that secondary, but my last guy, he's kind of a wild card because like he hasn't really played this position that we're going to put him at, but it's Damian Sanford. When we first offered him and got him, and I went and checked out his tape, I'm like, man, this dude is playing at like 1,000 miles an hour. I'm like, I had to check and make sure my phone wasn't sped up on the video, but he's not going to be the next Will Anderson. Like I want to preface that, but his play style reminds me of Will Anderson. Like just balls to the wall, 100% effort. Playing with his hair on fire. He's very fast, very physical. He was on the edge a lot in high school. It'll be more of an off the ball backer with us, but that's a guy I'm super excited to see him his development. But this class may not have been the most highly rated that we've ever had, but there's some really, really good pieces in here.
Oh yeah, and it's a lot of guys like even if they don't make the impact this year, you could see like next year, or the year after, where all of a sudden like they're like the key pieces to a pretty important team. But yeah, and Sanford, like I remember like when he committed, I think leading up to the commitment, you started hearing his name, and I was like, I've never even heard of this guy. But then like but then you go and like look at the offer list, and it was like he had like almost no Power 5 offers whatsoever, and then all of a sudden he does that June camp circuit, and it's like, oh, Bama just offered Texas just offered, A&M just offered. Like all of a sudden he's just getting like every offer under the sun in the matter of like a 2-week period.
Right.
And I mean, and that honestly, that's the kind of guy you want, because it's so hard to find anyone that's under the radar these days, because
Mhm.
that recruiting industry is so like like they're so committed to like trying to find these guys. So it's so rare that a guy comes in and like it's the summer before his senior year, and that's when he like pops on the radar.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
There's an article that Bud Elliott will do. Sorry, that Bud Elliott will do every NFL draft, and he'll look at the guys that go in the first round that weren't like blue chip players, and it's usually either they gained like 40 pounds after they were in high school, or they played a different sport, or they changed positions. Like I remember, I think it was Josh Allen, the defensive end, not the quarterback from Kentucky. Like he was like a quarterback or something, and then he played defensive end his senior year and just was just terrorizing offenses at defensive end. And Kentucky got him because no one else really knew about him. But that stuff is super interesting because it is such an industry, and like they leave, and coaches these days, like no stone is left unturned. And but there's always going to be guys that are either late bloomers or fall through the cracks or whatever else. But it's super interesting stuff.
And I'm blanking on his name, but we signed one other guy, I think, who was a defensive end, who he was like, we didn't sign him until like November, and he was exactly a player like you were talking about, that like I think he didn't play football, he quit football, and then he played again his senior year.
Yeah.
And like blew up, and then like A&M and Texas like both offered within like a week of each other in like November. I can't remember who his name was.
Is that Rylan Kennedy?
Yeah.
Is that his name?
Yeah. He's another one that like maybe not this year, because I think he probably is still very raw. But
yeah.
But that's I'm all about like take chances on guys who just have the raw skill, and then that you can coach them up.
They also signed a 400-pound defensive tackle.
Yeah. I'll be interested to see if there's not a goal line package with his name on it.
I mean, it's just physics.
Yeah. I mean, if nothing else, like when we have the ball on the 1-yard line, just put him in the backfield, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, who's going to stop him?
Yeah.
Because he is like, I mean, you watch him, like he doesn't play like he's that big.
Not at all. No, he's a pretty good athlete to be that big. That's all I've got on the run sheet. Any closing thoughts? Is there anything you're working on over at a Good Bull Hunting coming up?
Nothing in particular at the moment. We were really hoping we were going to have a larger March Madness run to cover, but
yeah,
that didn't work out.
Me too.
But no, I mean, excited for spring football. Excited to see kind of every year. I feel like you don't like find out exactly what your team's going to be, but there's always things you learn in spring football or in the spring game that end up coming to fruition during the season. I remember, during Jimbo's first spring game, I think that was when Jay Sternberger had like 2 touchdowns and like 120 yards. And that was coming off of, someone probably not giving a tight end that many receptions in like his entire 6 years.
Right.
So yeah, just excited, especially, with Petrino, just seeing what the offense is going to do and just hoping you can turn the page and actually have a good football team again.
Last season when things were getting bad and injuries and whatnot, I was like, do we still have the guy that had 3 interceptions in the spring game?
Yeah.
Like, let's put that guy in and see what he can do.
Right. But yeah, it's like ultimately, I think as A&M fans, it's just you just look forward to fully moving past that 2022 season, because it was just such a miserable experience. And just hoping this year will be better.
Yeah, man. After the basketball loss to Penn State, like I was down bad. I was like, this program is cursed. Like we are never going to be good at anything. I've come back down to earth a little bit, but
and then of course, like you're going into like then Penn State's playing Texas, and you're like, and of course they're going to shoot like 25%, from 3-point range against Texas, which is what they did.
Yeah.
And that's not like that's not saying A&M's cursed. That's just like that's law of averages. Like they weren't going to shoot 60% again, but
Yeah.
it still sucks seeing like that. Their like once in a lifetime performance just happened to be against you.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
It just feels like
wa-
that happens to us a lot.
Yeah.
I know that you'll know like you're gonna know some of these like better than we will because like they happened whenever we were younger. But watching Andrew Funk, just like it was like the Andrew Funk game, and he's just draining threes.
He was
Like
he was like Todd Blythe.
I was gonna say
Iowa
Todd
State
Blythe.
catching, yeah.
Yes, that's exactly what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Like Andrew Funk, Todd Blythe, Larry Fitzgerald, Quentin
Yeah.
Patton. Like
At least like Larry Fitzgerald, he went on to make you feel like,
great
okay, we
career.
shouldn't feel that bad about what happened. He did that to a lot of NFL corners too.
Yeah, Todd Blythe is like selling insurance or something right now.
Yeah.
Which is what Andrew Funk's going to be doing.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's the way it goes.
But yeah, it's like I feel like that was this past year was probably like for basketball, it was the biggest gut punch closest to I guess like 2007, like when we lost in the Sweet 16 to Memphis, of just like the team falling short of like what it was a team that I really thought had the potential to go farther.
Yeah.
And then just to get, I mean, not just lose in the first round, but like lose and it wasn't close.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think any of us saw that coming. I don't think Penn State saw that coming. So that was definitely a rough way to go out.
Yeah. Like I kept it on in the second half and I was like, oh, like maybe we can, get this lead down. No, they just widened their lead as the game went on. It just got worse.
I was the same way. Like, the second half started like, okay, like make a couple buckets, like get it down to closer to like 10 or 12. And then like find the time to like make your run and like you can do it. And then, like very quickly you're like, yeah, that's not this game.
Yeah. And then we were reduced to just jacking up threes, and I'm like, okay, this is not gonna end well for us. But that's the way it goes.
Yeah, that's the NCAA tournament more than anything. It's like we were far from the most surprising outcome of that first weekend.
Yeah, I'm glad that Purdue took the heat off of us after we lost.
Yeah, I mean, Purdue goes down, Kansas goes down, Arizona. I think there was one other 2 seed, but
Marquette.
It was. Yeah, there you go. I think I picked Marquette to win the national championship in my bracket. But
yeah, not to get too far into bracket talk, but like when I was filling out that regional, I was like, I'm gonna screw this up. I'm like, none of these teams that I picked are gonna come out of this side. It was like Purdue, Marquette, Duke, and I threw Marquette into the Final Four, and of course they lost the first weekend. But now it's gonna be like, like FAU, like they're gonna make the Final Four now.
Yeah, I saw some list, and it was like, and the preface of the list is like they're like 2 of these teams are going to make the Final Four, and it was like FAU, like Michigan State, a bunch of other ones I'm forgetting now.
Yeah.
But it was just like this absurd list of like, and the crazy thing was like of that list, I was like, Michigan State would be the most like chalky of these to make it, and they're a 7 seed.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, I
think Tennessee's in that bunch too. They're still playing.
Yeah.
A team we beat, but
that was the worst part was like watching the rest of the weekend, and you see Auburn won. You're like, we beat them twice. Like you see Mizzou win. You're like, we beat them twice. Arkansas is in the Sweet 16. We beat them twice. It's like that was the tough pill to swallow. So like it'd be one thing if you lost and you're like, okay, well, we lost to a better team. Like maybe we just weren't actually good this year. But then, you watch the rest of the games and you're like, no, I think we were really good. And we went cold at the wrong time, and we just ran into a team that just had a guy that made 8 out of 10 3-pointers. And that's the difference in the game.
Yeah.
But hey, on the bright side, they bring back most of that team next year. The portal for basketball is probably about to get crazy. I would assume so.
But that's the hard thing about basketball though, because like football, like when you're no longer contending for the national title. It's like because like basically when you lose your second game, it's over. You kind of shift expectations.
Yeah.
And then even like, when you go to your bowl game, this is the last game we play. Like no matter what happens, like the season's over.
Yeah.
Basketball is so hard because you're like, we could play 6 more games or we might be done tonight.
And none of the outcomes would be surprising. Like it happens every year.
Yeah. So like just the whole fact of like the single elimination just makes it really, really rough. Because baseball still has a huge tournament, but
Right.
it's like there's all these games where it's best of 3, and it's like, and normally like when it's when it's you're finally down to an elimination game because you have so many other games before that where it was like, okay, well if we lose we can still do this.
Yeah.
So yeah, basketball, like it's a rough roller coaster knowing that it's just every single game is win or go home.
Yeah.
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 I had kind of forgotten how stressful that is.
Yeah, I am never comfortable during a basketball game. Like even in football, like okay, we're up 4 touchdowns, we're probably gonna be okay. Basketball, no, it doesn't matter. I'm like,
Yeah.
I've seen us come back down 12,
Yeah.
down 12 with
Yeah.
a minute left.
No,
Like
I
anything
agree.
can
Like
happen.
that Northern Iowa game is like it's conditioned me to like, yeah, we'll be at 10 points with a minute left, and I'm like, it's not over. You don't know.
Well, I'll let you guys get out of here. We've been going for an hour 20, but the last thing I'll say is I am disgusted that LSU has a super team in baseball. Like at least we won a game out of the series last weekend, went 2-1, but they've got a guy batting over 500. Like that is absurd. Their starting pitchers walked like 4 guys all season. Like it's just ridiculous what they're doing over there. Hopefully, I think we're going to get more involved in the NIL on the baseball front, which is a great place for it. Like most of those guys aren't on full scholarships anyway, so hopefully we can take advantage of that. But
yeah, and you just hope long term that LSU may do what we all think they're going to do this season, but it might be a similar thing like with Tennessee last year, where you just hope that regional start, super regional start, and you avoid them long enough that someone unexpectedly trips them up and kind of takes them out of the running.
For sure. But
and everyone likes to bag on it's like A&M's excited just because they won 1 game out of the 3-game series, and it's like, well, first of all, like we all admit we lost the series and that kind of sucks, but secondly, that's now one of their 2 losses on the year. So let's not completely write it off.
They may only lose like 5 or 6 games this year.
Yeah,
we're going to be one of them.
There's going to be a lot of teams that get swept.
Yeah, but it feels like
at least we still got baseball.
Yeah, it feels like baseball's hitting their stride a little bit and get some guys back.
I feel like that's kind of like, because I went back and looked at even some of like Schloss's teams at TCU, like they would have slow starts. Like they would like drop midweek games to teams that you did not think they should. And then like at some point, like early on in conference play or even halfway through conference play, they get going and then it's just off to the races. So let's hope that happens again this year.
Yeah, fingers crossed. But Chase, any closing thoughts?
I don't think so. It was a good episode. Robert, thanks for coming on. Always good to have you on. You're welcome anytime. Anytime you want to on the podcast.
Yeah, man.
Let us know. We'll be happy to have you.
Yeah. Always like to talk A&M sports, especially with you guys. It's always a great conversation. So I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
We appreciate that and appreciate you coming on and keep up the good work over at Good Bull Hunting and on Twitter. You're fighting the good fight for us. We appreciate that.
I appreciate it. Somehow it's the blessing and the curse of you kind of get a large following, but then that means that like, oh my gosh, Thursday night when you lost that game, my mentions were a dark place. There was a lot of you kind of just had to keep on scrolling and just ignore a lot of it. But it's still a good time.
I've been using the mute button quite liberally these days.
I try not to. I try to just kind of just be a good sport and take my lumps. But like days like that when you just have something truly embarrassing happen, it's makes for a rough night.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, he is Robert Behrens. He's Chase Caldwell. Hopefully we'll catch Hayden next week. I'm Will Stone. This is the Ineligibles Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.